Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the syntax in English language forms. Our group is conformed by Carol Hill, Sebastián López, Juan Hernández, and Miguel Barleta. Here is our table of contents. First we have syntax versus grammar. Then we have constituents and phrases. Third we have word order. Fourth parts of a speech. And finally phrase structure rules. So let's begin with syntax versus grammar. Here is a little introduction and a little question. Why is it important to talk about syntax and grammar? So, very often when we study a language or even our own language, we hear terms like grammar and syntax. While many people use these words as if they mean the same thing, the truth is they're related but not identical. When we talk about the difference between syntax and grammar, we talk about what each one includes, how they relate to each other, and why it's useful to understand this distinction, especially if you're learning a language or studying linguistics. First, we have what is grammar. Grammar is the complete system of rules that organize and structure a language. Grammar can be divided in a lot of levels. First, we have phonetics and phonology. It is how words sound. Then we have morphology, which is how words are formed. For example, adding s for plurals or ed for past tense. Now we have syntax, that it is what our focus, and it's how words are arranged in sentences. We have also semantics, which is the meaning, the pragmatics, which is the language used in real life context, and grammar also includes spelling and punctuation in written language. For example, in English grammar tells us that you can say she go to school because the verb isn't conjugated correctly. The correct form is she goes to school. In this case, the verb is correctly conjugated. Now we have the syntax. What is syntax? Syntax is a specific part of grammar that focuses only on the structure and order of words in a sentence. The questions that syntax can answer is, for example, what words comes first, where does the verb go, or how do you form a question? In English, the basic word order for a sentence is subject plus verb plus object. In this case, we say the boy plays in the park. First the subject, then the verb, and finally the object. For example, if we change the order and say place the boy in the park, even though the words are correct, the sentence sounds strange or wrong. That's because we broke the rules of English syntax. Now, for the questions, syntax also plays a very important role. Because in English we ask, do you like music? But if we say you like music, that's not syntactically correct informal English. Because we could say this, but maybe in a casual speech, but not in formal English. Now we have the main difference between grammar and syntax. So, grammar is the entire system of a language rules, while syntax is just one part of grammar that focuses only on sentence structure. So, for example, all syntax is grammar, but not all grammar is syntax. When we commit a mistake, a grammar mistake, we might be, for example, a grammar mistake might be using a verb incorrectly, but a syntax mistake might be placing words in the wrong order, as we could see in the Examples. Why is the distinction useful? We could use the distinction to understand a lot of different uses. Like, for example, it improves your speaking and writing. It helps you when learning a new language, or it allows you to identify and correct errors more accurately. For example, when we say he don't like coffee, that's a grammar mistake because we are using the wrong auxiliary verb. It will be he doesn't like coffee. Yeah. And when we say like don't he coffee, that's a syntax mistake because it's like a wrong word order. Okay. Finally, a little conclusion could be that syntax are grammar go hand in hand. Each one helps each other. Grammar includes all the rules that make a language work, while syntax focuses only on how we organize words into sentences. Knowing the difference gives us a better understanding of how languages function and help us communicate more clearly and effectively.
Well, now I want to talk about the constituents and phrases. Well, um, these are two key concepts of syntax, and these are essential to understand how sentences are built and how meaning is structured in human language. Well, through definitions, examples, tests, and diagrams, we can clarify how these elements work. And now we have to talk about what are constituents. Well, a constituent is a group of words that has meaning by itself and don't need a full sentence to have a real meaning. So, as an example, we can say the tall man opened the door, and here the tall man is one constituent because it acts as a subject, and opened the door is another one. And then the door is a smaller constituent because it is a noun phrase. But how do we know what is a constituent? Well, there are some ways to identify them. The first I want to mention is the substitution test. This is about replace the constituent with a pronoun in a sentence, and it should make sense. For example, the tall man. The tall man opened the door. Well, if we replace the tall man with he, it makes sense. He opened the door. The second test is the movement test. What is this about? Well, when we have to identify a constituent with this method, we should move the constituent to the front of the sentence, and if it is still makes sense, it is a constituent. For example, the door. Tall man opened it. It still makes sense, so tall man is a constituent. Finally, the question test. This consists in if you can form a question where the group of words is the answer, it is a constituent. The same example that we have been using. Who opened the door? The tall man. Or in the same sentence, we have other constituent, that is the door. So we can say, what did he open? The door. Well, I want to talk about phrases. Some constituents appears as phrases and they function as a grammatical unit. Every phrase has a head. For example, the small cat with a red collar. This is a noun phrase. because the cat is the head of this phrase, and all the other words in the sentence are there to modify the noun. And there are some different type of phrases. We have the noun phrase, for example, the short guy or the big cat. Then we have the verb phrases, for example, run faster or sit there. We have the prepositional phrases, like under the table or near the college. Then we have the adjective phrases, like very tall or totally incredible. And the adverbial phrase, like quite easily or in the morning. Identify the different type of phrases help us to analyze the structure of any sentence. But constituents are really important in linguistics. They can help us to analyze the meaning of a sentence, to understand and explain ambiguities, or just to teach English or other languages to other people.
So, hello, let's continue with this part of the topic that for me is the easiest. Just it's only what is word order. You're talking about word order, and it's so easy. It's literally how we put words in a sentence, in whatever sentence. So, in English, the usual order is SVO. What does it mean? Subject, verb, plus object. For example, here, Anna eats an apple. In this case, we are using present simple, but it's the same order in the majority of the time expressions, in past, in present continuous, etc. So, an activity. We have three words that we have to choose. In the first one, the subject could be a name or he. Saying he is okay. In this case, the kid or this guy is sleeping or is in a bed, but the action here is sleeping or getting up, but sleeping is easiest. So he is sleeping, and finally we have an object. In this case, or in this context, is a bed. So the complete sentence is he is sleeping in a bed. It's so easy, right? Other elements in a sentence that convert a sentence like hardly are the adjectives or the adverbs. Those are different situations. And for example, the adjectives go before the noun. In this example, a big dog. Always the adjective go before the noun we are talking about. Never after, like in Spanish. Adverbs can go before or after the verb. It doesn't care or depending in the context. For example, she quickly runs or she runs quickly. For me, is better. She runs quickly. For me, it sounds better. Or in questions, I have to use another word when we are talking about we are talking in present simple. That word is does, and the verb comes before the subject. Like SBO is literally the same, but using does and the question mark. Does Anna eat apples? So word order examples, depending of the sentence type. In affirmative, she reads a book, as we said before. In negative, she doesn't read books, is SBO. In questions is SBO. Does she read books? Always is SBO. But adding some words like does that is mandatory to use it in simple present betting questions, or the not when we have to um, use a negative form. And in other languages, like in Spanish or in Arabic, the order changes in some like crazy uh, mm, situations because they say she apples eats and it's so strange. Or in Arabic, eats she apples. That is verb, subject, object, and it doesn't have a good meaning or it's not easy to understand if I don't know in America and someone told you she apples eats. It doesn't have sense. So in English, subject verb object is the most common and like the correctly way to speak. And why is the word order important? Of course, it's because it helps us to understand who is doing what in a sentence, and it makes like the meaning clear, or you're not going to understand it. In English, changing the order, like we said before in Japanese or in Arabic, using subject, object, verb, mm, is can completely change the meaning of a sentence. For example, the dog chased the cat. The cat chased the dog. Like in this example, and this sentence use the same words, but the meaning is different because of the word order. Mm, this means that we usually cannot change the order without making sentence confusing or saying it wrong. And in other languages, the order can be more flexible, like in Spanish, for example, but in English is super mandatory. In this example, the dog bites the man, the dog is the subject. But if I say the man bites the dog, now the man is the subject. The man is who is doing the action to the dog. And the dog in this case is the object. Okay, quickly activity. I eat pizza. I have to um, identify what is the subject, what is the verb, and what is the object. Is so easy. As I said before, always is SVO. So I, subject, eat, verb, pizza, object. And the same with she reads books. And in the other part, dogs chase cats. And here, what is the subject? Dogs chase or cats? Of course, chase is not, because chase is a verb that is located in the correct place, in the second. And dogs could be an object and the subject, but it depends of the context. Of course, as we know, dogs chase the cats all the time, so in this case it's located correctly. Maria drinks water, of course, that's the correct order, because water drinks Maria. It doesn't have sense. And football plays he, probably in other languages are correct, but in English is he plays football. I hope that you understand the topic. It's so easy, but it's mandatory to understand it correctly because in some cases we don't understand the meaning of a sentence because we don't know about who or who is doing the action and it could be confused. So thank you and continue with the other topics.
Hi, my name is Carol Hill, and today I'm going to explain the parts of speech. So, parts of speech are the basic type of words used in a language categorized based on their function in a sentence. They help us to understand how words work together to form meaningful sentences. These are each part of speech explains what a word does and whether it means something, describes something, shows action, connect words, and so on. The parts of speech are categories that tell us how a word functions in a sentence. These are like the base, like the more plain explanation of this topic. We have a traditional parts of a speech that is a noun, pronoun, verb, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection. I'm going to explain it like a little review of each one. Nouns have proper nouns, common nouns, countable and uncountable nouns, concrete and abstract nouns. The pronoun it replaces a noun, and the verb are we have main verbs, auxiliary verbs, modal verbs, and transitive and intransitive verbs. We have adjectives that modify nouns, adverbs that modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. We have adverbs of manner, time, frequency, and degree. We have another important categories that are the preposition, the conjunction, and the interjection. Prepositions show the relationship between words, and conjunction it connects words or clauses. And at the end, we have the interjections that shows an emotion or a reaction. In this case, like wow, ouch, hey, we have that kind of things. Okay, for the phrase structure rules part. The phrase structure rules are that tell us how words combine into phrases and sentences in a hierarchical way. Each phrase is built around a header word that determines the phrase category. The basic phrase types we have sentence, noun phrase, verb phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, and prepositional phrase. The sentence is one that has inside a noun phrase and a verb phrase. A verb phrase is composed by determiners, adjectives, or also nouns, obviously, prepositions, and so on. For the other part, we have verb phrases that are that have noun phrases also. It can contain noun phrases, prepositional phrases, adverbial phrases, and others. Adjective phrases. It can also be only an adjective or an adjective and a noun. An adverb phrase that is sometimes is only an adverb, but it can be also an adverb and a noun. And the prepositional phrase that is the preposition and a noun in this case. To explain this in a more understandable way, we have the tree structure. In the phrase structure, we have two types. That is the tree structure and the bracket structure. But in this presentation, I'm only going to explain the tree structure. The tree structure is formed by a sentence, a noun phrase, and a verb phrase. In this case, the verb phrase contains a verb and an adverbial phrase. And the determiner and the noun phrase, has a determiner and a noun. In this example, the noun phrase that contains, an adjective also, and a verb phrase can only have a verb. In this case, we have an adverbial phrase that contains a noun phrase that also contains a determiner and a noun. And for the end, we have why are important these structures. Well, the first thing that I can observe is that it helps us to identify grammar errors, like saying "me went to school" when it's "I went to school." It can be useful for learning other languages. That in this case, the English language have the structure or SVO, subject verb object, but in other languages like Japanese, we have the structure subject object verb. And as a fun fact, it's also used in the AI. The AI use natural language processing, that is NLP, to understand how the syntactic rules function and the grammatic rules also, and it help the AI to understand the language in a more complicated way. And that's it for this presentation. Thank you for watching.
That's interesting to know how analyze the different order of sentences and the different parts of the sentences, and I think that it supports a clear communication. And I chose to talk about constituents and phrases because they are fundamental to understand how language works. They shows the hidden structure that holds sentences together, and it could be really helpful to improve their grammatical awareness and analyze language. But for us, we can use it to teach better and support our students to develop their fluency and accuracy in language. And in the context of teaching English, I think that is an important topic because a lot of students struggle with sentence construction and reading comprehension, so sometimes they don't recognize how word groups work together. And as future teachers, knowing about constituents and phrases help us to explain grammar more clearly to our future students. And we can build lessons to help them to understand the different meaning of these sentences.